poor girl helps a guy with flat tire, not knowing he's a millionaire, and falls in love with her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The wind cut through the highway like a cold knife. Rain fell in steady sheets, glistening under the streetlights of a quiet rural road. The night smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline. Lila Carson tightened her worn denim jacket as she pedaled her old bicycle home from her second job. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. The air was freezing, her hands numb on the handlebars, but her mind was set on the $5 tip folded inside her pocket. That small amount would help her buy groceries for the week. A flash of red caught her attention. A black sedan had stopped on the shoulder ahead, its hazard lights blinking. One tire hung flat and lifeless. Standing beside it was a man in a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, trying to lift a jack that looked too new for his hands. Rain soaked his hair, and frustration drew sharp lines across his face. Lila hesitated. She could keep riding. It was late. The road was empty. But then she saw him glance at his phone, shaking it uselessly. No signal. Something in her heart pushed her forward. She braked, dropped one foot to the wet pavement, and called out over the rain. "Do you need help?" The man looked up, startled. His voice was deep, quiet. "I think the spare is fine, but the jack will not stay steady." Lila smiled faintly. "Step back. I got this." Before he could object, she set down her bike, knelt beside the tire, and adjusted the jack with firm, practiced hands. Her father had taught her how to fix old trucks before he passed away. The man watched as she worked quickly, her fingers slick with mud and oil, her breath visible in the cold air. "You do this often?" he asked. "Only when the universe sends someone unlucky enough," she said, laughing softly. For the first time that night, he smiled. It was a small, genuine smile that seemed to surprise even him. When the tire was back in place, she stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "There," she said, catching her breath. "You are good to go." He opened his mouth to thank her, but she shook her head. "No need. Just promise me you will drive slower in the rain." "Wait," he said quickly. "You are soaked. At least let me pay you for the help." Lila's smile faded into something tender. "If you really want to pay me, just remember that not everyone who stops on the road wants something in return." She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old cotton handkerchief. "Here, use this to clean up. You can give it back someday if fate allows." He hesitated, then took it carefully, as if it were something more valuable than a piece of cloth. "Thank you," he said quietly. Lila picked up her bicycle and mounted it again. Rain cascaded off her hair as she looked back one last time. The man stood beside his repaired car, the handkerchief in his hand, watching her ride away into the dark. For a long moment after she disappeared, he stayed still, feeling the faint warmth of her kindness linger in the night. He did not yet know her name, but that simple act had already changed something deep inside him. And as the black sedan rolled back onto the highway, its headlights cutting through the rain, a single thought crossed his mind. "Sometimes," he whispered, "the people who stop for you are the ones you were meant to find." The morning sun broke through a thin veil of gray clouds, washing the small town in a pale light. The storm had passed, but the road still shimmered with leftover rain. Inside a modest one-bedroom apartment above a small diner, Lila Carson stood by the window, sipping instant coffee from a chipped mug. Her fingers were rough from long shifts, and the smell of detergent never really left her hands. The world outside carried on as usual. Cars honked in the distance, a bus sighed at the corner, and people hurried toward jobs that at least paid on time. Lila buttoned her uniform, a faded yellow shirt with the name of the diner stitched over her chest. Her rent was due that Friday. She had $42 left in her wallet, and a stack of unpaid utility bills on the counter. Still, she smiled faintly as she remembered the night before the stranger on the road, the rain, the look of surprise when he realized she knew how to change a tire. It had been a small moment, but it made her feel useful again. She told herself not to read into it. He was probably halfway across the state by now, driving one of those expensive cars toward a life she could never imagine. Downstairs, The diner was already alive with the morning rush. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. Lila tied her apron and began taking orders with the same gentle patience that made the regulars adore her. "Morning, Lila," called Frank, the cook behind the counter. "You look less tired today." "Miracles happen," she joked, pouring coffee for an elderly couple. Inside, she was exhausted. The late shifts at the gas station and the early mornings here were wearing her thin. But she kept pushing forward. Her younger brother, Noah, was finishing his senior year of high school in another town. Every month, she sent him a little money for textbooks and food. She promised their father before he died that Noah would never have to quit school the way she did. The clock on the wall ticked past 9. The radio played a soft tune from the 1980s. Then, without warning, the front door opened and a gust of cool air swept through the diner. Lila looked up. A man in a dark gray suit stepped inside. His clothes were still damp at the edges from the wet streets, but his presence filled the small space. For a second, her heart skipped. It could not be him. But when he lifted his head and their eyes met, she froze. It was the same man from the highway. He saw recognition flash across her face and offered a quiet smile. "Good morning," he said. His voice was calm, deeper than she remembered. "Do you serve breakfast here?" Yes, of course," she managed. "Sit anywhere you like." He chose a booth near the window, setting his leather briefcase beside him. Lila forced herself to stay composed, grabbing a menu even though she already knew it by heart. She placed it in front of him, avoiding his gaze. "I never got to thank you properly," he said, glancing up. "Last night, you helped me when no one else stopped." "It was nothing," she replied softly. "Anyone would have done the same." "I am not sure about that." His tone was thoughtful. "I would like to pay for breakfast. At least let me do that." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Coffee?" "Yes, please, black." Lila brought the cup a few minutes later, her hands steady even though her mind was racing. He looked different in daylight, refined, polished, the kind of man who belonged in boardrooms, not on broken highways. When she caught sight of a gold watch on his wrist, the truth sank in deeper. He was not just wealthy. He was from a world far above hers. As he ate, he asked simple questions. Where she worked, how long she had lived in town, what she liked to do outside of work. There was no arrogance in his voice, only genuine curiosity. She told him about her dream of opening a small auto repair shop one day, a place where single mothers could learn basic car maintenance. He listened carefully, nodding. When he finished his meal, he reached into his wallet, placed money on the table, and stood up. "I hope you do open that shop someday, Lila. The world could use more people like you." She blinked, surprised that he remembered her name. "Wait, how do you—" He smiled. "You mentioned it last night, while tightening the bolts." Her cheeks warmed. "Right. I talk too much when I am nervous." "Then I hope you stay nervous," he said gently, and for a moment his eyes softened, almost vulnerable, "because it makes you real." Before she could reply, he turned and walked out into the sunlight. Lila stood there, holding the coffee pot, watching as the door closed behind him. Frank called from the counter, "Who was that?" Lila exhaled slowly, a quiet smile forming. Just someone passing through. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Somewhere in her chest, a spark had been lit small, steady, and impossibly bright. The days rolled by quietly, like pages turning in a book that no one else was reading. Lila Carson returned to her usual rhythm, double shifts, late nights, and the faint hope that the man from the highway would fade into memory. Yet somehow, he did not. Every time she passed the spot where his car had broken down, she thought of his smile and the way he had said, "I hope you open that shop someday." She told herself it was foolish to think about him. He belonged to another world, a world of leather briefcases and expensive watches. But still, the memory of his kindness lingered like a note of music that refused to end. On Thursday evening, the diner was half empty. Rain tapped softly against the windows again, the same rhythm as the night they met. Lila wiped the counter while Frank counted tips. "You keep staring out that window," he teased. "Expecting someone?" "Just watching the rain," she said quickly, though her heart knew better. She went upstairs to her small apartment after closing. The room smelled faintly of soap and wet clothes. She hung her apron by the door and sat on the edge of her bed. There, on the nightstand, was the folded newspaper that came with the morning deliveries to the diner. She had not planned to read it, but a headline caught her eye. Skyline Industries announces new community initiative, led by Ethan Cole. Her hand froze on the paper. Ethan Cole. The name echoed in her mind. It could not be a coincidence. She looked closer at the photograph below the headline. The same calm eyes, the same smile. Her breath caught. He was not just a man with a flat tire. He was the chief executive officer of Skyline Industries, one of the largest development companies in the state. The realization hit her like a wave of cold water. For a long time, she sat there in silence, the newspaper trembling in her hands. She had spoken to him as if he were ordinary. She had laughed, teased him, even handed him her old handkerchief like he was a lost traveler. She felt foolish, embarrassed, and oddly betrayed. The next morning, Lila worked her shift without her usual energy. Her mind was heavy with questions. Why had he not told her who he was? Why pretend to be someone else? Did he just enjoy seeing how the poor girl lived? By the time she finished, the sky had cleared. The sun came out shyly from behind the clouds, glinting off wet pavement. She untied her apron, grabbed her coat, and stepped outside. Across the street, a car slowed to a stop. The door opened, and Ethan stepped out. He wore no suit today, just a gray sweater and jeans. He looked more human, less like the man from the newspaper. "Lila," he called softly, walking toward her. "I was hoping to catch you before you went home." Her heart raced, but her face stayed calm. "You found me again, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice steady but distant. He hesitated, as if unsure how to start. "You read about me." "I did," she said. "It was hard to miss your picture in the paper." He nodded slowly. "I should have told you who I was." "Why did you not?" she asked. "Did you think I would treat you differently?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe I was afraid that you would. Or maybe I wanted, for once, to be just a man on the side of the road and not the name on a building." Lila crossed her arms. "You have that luxury, Ethan, to choose when to be ordinary. Some of us never get the choice." He took a step closer. "You are right, and I am sorry. I never meant to deceive you. I meant to thank you." He reached into his pocket and unfolded something carefully, the handkerchief she had given him that night. It was clean, pressed, and folded neatly. "I kept this," he said. "It reminded me that kindness still exists without reason. I wanted to return it in person." Lila looked at it but did not take it. "You did not have to come all this way for that." He smiled softly. "I did, because that night reminded me what I had forgotten. Money can fix a flat tire, but it cannot fix loneliness. You helped me remember that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cars passed, the breeze moved softly between them, and the air smelled of wet earth and coffee. Lila finally sighed and took the handkerchief from his hand. "Thank you, Ethan. I hope your world of boardrooms and headlines stays kind to you." "Oh." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Lila, please wait. I am starting a project, something for people like you, hardworking, with dreams but no resources. It is called the Community Garage. I want you to be part of it." She blinked, uncertain. "Why me?" "Because you are the reason it exists," he said quietly. "You helped a stranger in the rain, and that stranger wants to help others the same way." Lila stood still, the wind brushing her hair across her face. For the first time, she did not see him as a stranger or a millionaire. She saw him as a man trying, in his own way, to make something right. But she still did not answer. Instead, she whispered, "Let me think about it," and walked away, her hand gripping the handkerchief tightly against her heart. A week passed before Lila Carson heard from Ethan Cole again. She had returned to her routine, but his offer kept echoing in her mind. The Community Garage, a place where women like her could learn skills, fix cars, and earn honest pay. It sounded like a dream, too good to be real. On Monday morning, an envelope arrived at the diner. Her name was written in clean, even handwriting. Inside was a simple letter. "Dear Lila, the Community Garage opens next week. If you are still thinking about it, there will be an open day this Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. No commitment, just come and see. With respect, Ethan Cole." The paper smelled faintly of cedar and rain, just like that night on the highway. Lila folded the letter carefully, and tucked it into her apron pocket. By Friday, curiosity won over doubt. She took the early bus to the city. The building stood at the corner of Brookfield Avenue and 5th Street, newly painted in white and gray, with a bright blue sign that read, "The Community Garage, a Skyline Initiative." Through the glass doors, she saw workstations, shelves of tools, and a few women in overalls learning to replace a car battery under supervision. Ethan was there, dressed casually, sleeves rolled up, showing the visitors around. When he noticed her by the door, his face lit up, not the polished smile from the newspapers, but something warmer, real. "You came," he said, walking over. "I said I would think about it," Lila replied, her tone cautious but not cold. He gestured for her to follow. "Let me show you around." They walked between rows of vehicles and tool racks. The air smelled of motor oil and fresh paint. Lila ran her hand along a new set of wrenches, the kind she had only seen in catalogs. "All of this," Ethan said, "is for people who want to build something. No college degree required, no connections needed, just effort." Lila looked at him, her brow furrowed. "Why are you doing this?" He paused, choosing his words. "Because when you helped me that night, I realized how easily people in my position forget what it means to need help. I have resources. I want to use them right this time." She studied his face. He seemed sincere. No cameras, no reporters, just quiet determination. "And what do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to teach, to guide others. You already know how to fix cars. You just need a place to share it." Her heart trembled with something she could not name. For years she had dreamed of this, but now that it was real, fear crept in. "What if I am not good enough?" Ethan smiled gently. "You were good enough the night you helped me in the rain. Everything since then has only proved it." For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the hum of engines. Lila felt something shift inside her, a flicker of belief. Maybe this was not pity. Maybe it was a beginning. She took a deep breath and finally nodded. "All right, I will try." "No." Ethan's smile widened, not triumphant, but grateful. "Then welcome to the community garage, Lila." As they shook hands, sunlight streamed through the wide windows, glinting off the polished tools like small stars. For the first time in a long while, Lila felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. The road that had once left her stranded in the rain was leading her somewhere new. Within a few weeks, the community garage began to feel like a second home to Lila Carson. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise, tying her hair back and opening the wide metal doors to let in the light. The smell of oil, paint, and coffee mixed in the air. For the first time in years, she woke up with a sense of purpose. She was teaching women how to change tires, check oil, and stand on their own 2 feet. Ethan Cole visited often, not as a boss, but as someone quietly invested in the work. He walked among the trainees, asking questions, learning names, and listening more than he spoke. Lila noticed the way he treated everyone with patience, not power. Still, there was a distance between them, a quiet wall that neither of them seemed ready to cross. One afternoon, after class ended, Lila stayed behind to finish cleaning the workspace. She was wiping down a workbench when Ethan appeared at the door, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you could use this," he said. She smiled faintly, taking the cup. "Thank you. You really do not have to keep doing that. I like being here," he said simply. "It reminds me what all of this is for." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the room in amber. Then Ethan spoke again, his voice quieter. "You know, Lila, the board at Skyline was against this project. They said it would not bring profit." Lila frowned. "Then why fight for it?" "Because not everything worth doing is meant to make money," he replied. "Sometimes it is about proving that compassion can build something stronger than numbers." She looked at him, studying his face in the fading light. He seemed different from the man she had seen in the newspaper. Softer, humbler. "You are not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" "A man who would forget the people below him once the cameras stopped." He chuckled lightly. "That used to be me. Until a stranger on a bike decided my flat tire was worth her time." Her cheeks warmed, and she looked away. "You make it sound like I did something extraordinary." "You did," he said gently. "You saw me when no one else did, and now you are helping others do the same." Before Lila could answer, A sharp voice echoed from the entrance. "Mr. Cole, we have a problem." A woman in a suit hurried in, holding a tablet. "The reporters are outside. They found out about your connection to the instructor. They are asking if this entire project is just a publicity stunt." Lila's stomach dropped. "What?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It is fine. I will handle it." But she could already see the headlines forming in her mind. "Millionaire uses poor girl to build charity image." Her throat went dry. "This is bad, Ethan. They will think you are just using me." "I do not care what they think," he said firmly. "I care about what is true." "Truth does not matter to people who only see money," she whispered. Ethan took a step closer. "Then we will show them something they cannot buy." Outside, the faint hum of cameras and voices grew louder. Lila felt her pulse race. Fear mixing with something else, trust. Maybe for once, she was not standing alone in the storm. Ethan glanced toward the noise, then back at her. "Let me face them," he said softly. "And let me prove that this is real." "Oh." Lila looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will stand beside you." And together, they walked toward the door as the sound of clicking shutters filled the air, the truth waiting to be tested under the bright light of the world outside. The next morning, headlines covered every major news site. Ethan Cole's community garage. Questioned. Is it a publicity ploy or real charity? Lila Carson stood behind the counter of the diner, staring at the glowing television mounted on the wall. The footage showed Ethan speaking to reporters, his calm voice, explaining the mission of the program and denying any ulterior motive. But still, the comments rolling beneath the screen stung. "Rich man redeems himself through sob story." "Pretty mechanic helps millionaire fix his image." Oh, her stomach tightened. Even though Ethan had faced the cameras alone, she knew her name would come up sooner or later. It always did when the poor crossed paths with the powerful. By the time she returned to the garage that afternoon, the mood had shifted. Some trainees whispered as she passed, their curiosity poorly hidden. Ruth, one of the older women, touched her arm gently. "Do not let them get to you, honey. People always talk when they see good things happening." "Oh." Lila nodded, forcing a smile. But when she entered the office, she saw Ethan standing by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp and frustrated. "I told you this is not for publicity. No, I will not cancel it. The story will fade, and the work will speak for itself." He ended the call and turned toward her, the tension still visible on his face. "I am sorry you had to see that." "It is fine," she said quietly. "I saw the news." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "They twisted everything. They said I hired you because of that night." "Did you?" she asked, half teasing but mostly afraid of the answer. He met her gaze. "No, Lila. I asked you to join because you remind me what this place is supposed to be about people, not image." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. Still, a small doubt flickered inside her. "It is hard for people like me to believe that," she said softly. "Every time someone rich does something kind, there is always a price." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then let me prove that there is not." Before she could respond, the door burst open. A man in a black suit entered, holding a file. "Mr. Cole, the board has called an emergency meeting. They want to suspend the project until the investigation clears." Ethan's expression hardened. "Investigation? Into what?" The man hesitated. "Someone from the finance department claims donations were redirected to this garage without approval. They are accusing you of mismanagement." Lila's eyes widened. "That is not true." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Of course it is not. But the board will not care until they have proof." The man handed him the papers. "The meeting is at 5 o'clock. When he left, silence filled the room. Lila could feel the air grow heavier. "What will you do?" Ethan looked at her, determination flashing behind his calm exterior. "I will fight it. I will not let them destroy what we built." "Can I help?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Just keep teaching. Keep the doors open. That will help more than you know." Lila nodded, though fear lingered in her chest. As Ethan gathered the documents and walked out, she watched him go, the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. For the first time since the rain-soaked night they met, Lila realized how much was at stake not just for him, but for the people depending on them both. And as the garage fell silent, she whispered to herself, Kindness always costs something. I just hope this time it is worth it. The week that followed was the longest one Lila Carson could remember. The community garage stayed open, but the energy inside had changed. Reporters no longer came, yet their shadows lingered. Some donors withdrew their support, others called for audits. And through it all, Ethan Cole fought quietly, moving between meetings, lawyers, and restless board members who wanted him gone. Every evening, Lila waited for him to return. Some nights he did. Other nights he did not. When he appeared, he looked exhausted but determined. His sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, voice calm, even when everything else was breaking apart. On Thursday, she found him alone in the office, staring at a stack of papers. The blinds were half closed, cutting stripes of light across his face. "Ethan," she said softly, "you look like you have not slept." He smiled faintly without looking up. "Sleep feels like a luxury lately. Did the meeting go that badly?" He sighed and leaned back. "Worse. Someone on the inside leaked financial reports. They twisted the numbers to make it look like I transferred funds into a private account. They are calling it embezzlement." Lila felt her knees weaken. "That is impossible. You would never do that." "I know," he said. "But the truth does not matter if they control the story." She stepped closer. "Who would do this to you?" "I have a good guess," he admitted. "A senior partner named Daniel Voss. He has been pushing to take over Skyline for years. This project threatened his plans." The thought made Lila's chest tighten. "So he framed you?" "Yes, and unless I can prove it, the board will remove me by the end of the month." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Lila could hear the faint hum of the garage below, the clinking of tools, the laughter of women learning to fix their first engine. This place was built on faith, and now that faith was being dismantled piece by piece. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "Something to show the truth." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Daniel covered his tracks too well. Every transaction looks legitimate. If I accuse him without proof, it will destroy me." Lila's gaze drifted to the corner of the office where old boxes of receipts and ledgers were stacked. "Then maybe the proof is here," she said quietly. He looked up. "Lila, that is hundreds of hours of work." She shrugged. "I have done harder things for less reason." That night, they worked side by side. The hours slipped away as they combed through documents, highlighting inconsistencies and tracing donation records. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Lila's eyes burned, but she kept going. When she reached the last folder, she froze. "Ethan," she whispered, "look at this." He leaned over her shoulder. Inside the report was a payment authorization signed under Daniel's name, transferring funds from Skyline's charity branch into a shell company registered under his assistant. The date matched the one in question. "This is it," Ethan breathed. "This is the proof." Lila looked up at him, relief flooding her chest. "Then take it to the board. End this." Ethan nodded, emotion softening his voice. "I will. But not just for me, for everyone who believed in this place." As dawn began to rise outside the window, painting the world in shades of gold and gray, Lila felt something new hope. For the first time in days, the darkness began to break. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved me again," he said quietly. Lila smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "No, Ethan, you just needed someone to remind you where to look." The board meeting was held on a cold Monday morning inside the glass conference room of Skyline Industries. The city skyline stretched beyond the windows, tall and sharp, like silent witnesses to what was about to happen. Ethan Cole entered with quiet confidence, carrying a single folder in his hand. The room fell silent. Every executive, every advisor, every skeptic turned to face him. Lila Carson waited outside in the hallway, her heart pounding. She had spent the entire weekend organizing the evidence, making sure every document was clear and every date matched. Now it was out of her hands. She could only trust that the truth would speak louder than the lies. Inside, Ethan placed the folder on the long oak table. "Before this meeting continues," he said, "I need you all to see something." Daniel Voss, seated at the far end, leaned back with a smirk. "Unless you plan to admit what you did, I do not see what else there is to discuss." Ethan's calm did not falter. He opened the folder and spread out the documents. These are transaction records from the charity branch. You accused me of redirecting funds, but as you can see here, the authorizing signature belongs to you, Daniel." The room buzzed. Murmurs broke out as the board members leaned forward, scanning the pages. Daniel's face drained of color. "That is absurd. Those papers could have been forged." Ethan clicked a remote, and a projection appeared on the screen behind him, video footage from the company's internal security system. It showed Daniel's assistant entering the finance office after hours and accessing restricted files. The timestamp matched the forged transfers. "Forgery?" Ethan said softly. "No, it is fact." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "Daniel Voss, you are hereby suspended pending investigation. Mr. Cole, we owe you an apology." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. "You cannot do this. I built this company." But security was already approaching. The door closed behind him, and silence followed. Ethan exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Thank you, all of you," he said quietly. "But this victory is not about me. It is about restoring faith in what we do." When the meeting ended, Lila looked up as the door opened. Ethan stepped into the hallway, his expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "Well?" she asked, holding her breath. "It is over," he said. "The board cleared my name. Daniel is finished." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "You did it." "No," he said softly, "we did it." They walked outside together into the cold afternoon air. The sky had cleared, the clouds dissolving into blue. Cameras waited near the entrance, reporters calling Ethan's name. He paused, turning toward them. "I will make one statement," he said clearly. "The community garage will remain open. It was never a publicity stunt. It was built by people like Lila Carson, who reminded me that success means nothing without integrity. She represents the real heart of this project." Lila froze as the cameras swung toward her. She felt heat rise to her face, but Ethan's steady gaze calmed her. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "If you want to know what saved me," he said to the crowd, "it was not wealth or power. It was kindness. It was the courage of one woman who stopped on a rainy night to help a stranger." For a moment, the noise around them vanished. There was only the sound of wind, the click of cameras, and the steady rhythm of two hearts that had finally found the same pace. Ethan turned to her and whispered, "We are free now." Lila smiled through her tears. "Then let us use that freedom to do something good." And as the reporters shouted their questions, they walked away together hand in hand, ready to face the world with truth as their armor and compassion as their guide. 6 months later, the town was blooming with new life. The community garage had grown into something larger than Lila Carson could ever have imagined. The once quiet warehouse now buzzed with energy every day, filled with the laughter of trainees and the rhythmic hum of tools. Posters with the words "Skill," "Strength," "Second Chances" hung proudly on the walls. The project had expanded into 3 neighboring cities, each one run by women who had once stood where Lila did, tired, uncertain, but full of potential. Outside, a warm spring breeze carried the scent of motor oil and lilacs from the garden near the lot. Lila stood by the door, wiping her hands on a rag, her coveralls marked with streaks of grease. She watched a group of young women fix their first flat tire and smiled as they cheered when the wheel locked perfectly into place. Behind her, a familiar voice said, "They are getting faster every week." She turned to see Ethan Cole walking toward her, wearing a simple shirt and jeans. There was no trace of the businessman who once hid behind boardrooms and headlines. He was different now, lighter, freer, as though he had finally learned how to breathe. "They learn from the best," Lila said with a small laugh. "Though I still make them check their work twice." Ethan smiled. "You sound like someone who was born to teach." "Maybe I just needed someone to believe I could." He stepped closer, the sunlight catching in his eyes. "I always did." For a moment, silence fell between them, comfortable and warm. Lila glanced down at her hands. "It still feels strange sometimes," she admitted. "Going from a waitress who could barely pay rent to running a program that changes lives." Ethan shook his head. "You did not change, Lila. You just finally had a place to shine." She looked at him, emotion tightening her throat. "You gave me that chance. And you gave me a reason to deserve it," he said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and familiar. It was her old handkerchief, now framed in a thin glass case, the initials LC, stitched at the corner. Beneath it, a silver plate was engraved with the words, "The beginning of everything." Lila laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You kept it all this time." "I told you I would return it one day," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I wanted to add something to it first." She frowned slightly. "Add what?" Ethan took her hand and placed the frame gently inside it. Then, from his other pocket, he revealed a small velvet box. Opening it, he showed her a simple gold ring. "Lila Carson," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You stopped for a stranger on a rainy night. You helped him when you had nothing to gain. You showed him what kindness really means. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that your kindness was never wasted. Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, the world went still. The laughter from the workshop faded, the air thick with sunlight and memory. Lila covered her mouth, tears glistening. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking into a smile. 1,000 times yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, and the room erupted in cheers from the women who had been quietly watching through the windows. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, they stood outside together. The old highway shimmered in the distance, the same road where their story began. Lila leaned her head on his shoulder and said softly, "Funny how one broken tire can lead you home." Ethan kissed her forehead. "It was never about the tire," he murmured. "It was about the person who stopped to fix it." "Oh." And as the sky turned gold and violet, their laughter echoed across the lot, a promise of love, born from kindness, tested by truth, and sealed with the quiet certainty that some rescues last forever.